In order to guarantee a high score, you have to focus on a proper learning strategy instead of just some quick tips for every question, right? You need to be focusing on just some main ideas that are going to actually improve your score over the long run instead of some quick things that are only going to get you maybe like an additional 10% accuracy, 15% accuracy on one type of question. And that only is going to be applicable if you don't have like a close to perfect score, which means you're probably applying all those tricks already. I'm going to give you a framework which involves just some basic steps. And if you just follow those steps, you can significantly improve your score because you're going to be focusing on the right things. Hi, I'm Karthik. This is the fastest way to improve your SAT grammar score. Let's get right into it. Okay. The number one thing that's killing people's progress is the fact that they go into the questions with the wrong mindset, right? So typically what people do when they answer SAT grammar questions is they use their ear. And what that basically is, you've probably heard me say it a bunch, but still people will hear the explanation and still not do the correct thing. And essentially using your ear is this concept that, you're reading the question and then you're going over like, what is the specific thing that's correct, right? And let's say it's a word choice question and they're all different tenses, and all you do is you just insert the tense and then you see if it sounds correct and you pick the one that sounds the most correct. And that's actually the wrong thing to do, right? Because what you need to focus on, especially for SAT grammar, is that every single question is conceptually true or conceptually wrong. And what I mean by that is that every single answer choice has an exact definition and reason for why it's correct, right? So if you're picking it just based off of your ear, you're essentially guessing. All that is guessing. Your ear doesn't actually tell you anything in terms of its correctness unless it's like wildly incorrect and that's not like a standard convention or something that's spoken a lot, right? So the first thing you should focus on is actually figuring out if you're using your ear. If you're using your ear at all in any question, right, and that involves guessing or sounding it out and reading the whole thing with the answer choice inputted to see if it's correct, that's just the complete wrong thing to do. You're just guessing, right? Here's how you should actually answer these questions. And it revolves that previous idea I just said, knowing the rule, right? So if you know the explicit rule of what needs to correlate with what, let's use that same example of verb agreement. So let's say the verb has to agree specifically with the subject. First, I isolate the subject of the sentence. I figure out if it's plural. Then I figure out the general tense of the whole paragraph, right? What is the tense of the paragraph? What are they referring to? And where exactly is this happening in terms of time? Is this a reference to the past? Is this the current? Is this the present? Is this a past participle, right? Is this like something that's way in the past and then we're actually talking about an event that's closer to us but still in the past, right? There's actually different tenses for that as well. So I figure out what exactly is the tense, what exactly is the plurality, and then I use both of those pieces of information to figure out the correct answer that's guaranteed to be true. I didn't use my ear at all in that process. I just used the explicit rule. You must get rid of the first way of thinking. Using your ear is completely up to chance. You're just messing up your potential to get answers correct in the future. So what you have to do is actually focus on the method, focus on using this method. And if you don't know exactly how to, use this method because maybe you don't know the grammar rules, that's the very first step. So let's talk about this learning and practice step for grammar, right? If you don't know the rules, or let's say you know some of the rules, but you don't know all of them, right? The main focus should be learning those rules, right? So one of the prerequisites to even apply that technique is by knowing the grammar concepts. And it's actually not that difficult to learn all of them. Honestly, like if you just spent like 3 or 4 hours to just learn every single grammar rule that's tested in the SAT, you could probably memorize all of them, or you probably just know all of them generally and all the highly specific cases. And in that additional hour, you could probably memorize it, right? So it honestly doesn't take that long to just like fully learn it and understand it and figure out essentially what you have to do with those rules, right? So all I would say is just focus on learning them, right? If you want to improve like your overall accuracy, right? So let's say you're getting like 12 wrong and it's not the same questions every time. And the reason why that might be is because you're using your ear. Take the hit and actually like change your method. And actually, if you're watching this, within like a week, I would say within even 2 weeks, this method does not take that long to apply. If you took 3 to 4 days solely focused on grammar, you would be able to improve on it radically by applying this method, right? Just because this method is ultimately how it's meant to be done. But essentially, it's never too far away especially for grammar, to change your method, take the time to learn this, and then start acing it, right? So here's what I want you to explicitly do. learn those rules with the College Panda blog. That's a resource that I really like because not only does it give you the grammar rules, it gives you only the rules that are tested on the SAT, the scenario and the type in which they're tested in the SAT, right? So it's not every single facet of one rule is tested. Maybe it's just a certain portions. And it also talks about how some portions are not tested and some are, and how what specifically the SAT likes to do as like common mistakes and how you can fix those. That's why I really like that resource. It has all the facets of it for the SAT paper version, right? So I'd focus specifically on learning from that resource, right? Just type the College Panda blog and then type like the grammar rule specifically, and like the first like thing will show up, and it'll just be that one specific grammar rule. And every grammar rule you want to cover, you just move to a different version, right? Move to a different article because they're all individually placed, right? And learning is not going to be the issue once you've passed through this, right? Once you like use it at least once, right? So there's some practice questions on that blog, and maybe you just test it out once or twice and actually like learn the method from that, right? So you do maybe a little bit of initial practice, then learning is no longer the issue because you've essentially memorized what you needed to memorize, right? You've learned what you needed to learn. Now what we need to focus on is actually practicing, right? Because here's the thing, it's not always going to be so clear how to apply it. And how you make it clear to apply it is by getting good at finding the pattern, right? Because essentially what these rules and what you're learning are just series of patterns, right? And what you need to be able to do is identify the incorrect pattern and replace it with the correct pattern, right? But the pattern to identify that is wrong or correct is going to get progressively harder, right? That's like the range of difficulty of tests. So Khan Academy is amazing for that because it gives you progressively harder questions and they isolate it by grammar category. So you can test like only the certain grammar skill that you want to actually get good at. So if there's types of questions that you do know the rule to, but you're still getting wrong, it's because you need to develop your level of pattern recognition. And this actually does not take very long. And you're not going to have all of the questions be in the scenario where it's extremely difficult. It's typically only going to be some, right? What I want you to do is just focus specifically on those some, right? And try to get to the hardest level, right? So when you reach 4 out of 4, like with the little semicircle thing on Khan Academy, there's another set of problems that's technically like a hidden 5 out of 4, which the problems get more difficult after you reach the perfection stage. And those are the problems that you want to generally ace. You want to get them like, 80% right. And once you're getting 80% right on the highest of extreme categories, everything else is relatively easy, right? So what this is going to help you do is recognize the pattern faster. So it's going to improve your time. And also time isn't a real constraint. It's just accuracy. If you're able to apply this method and get really good at it, time should not be a concern at all. So it's going to help you recognize faster and in the hardest of scenarios. So you're going to be perfect for knowing the rule and applying this method and having practiced it with very difficult concepts. Okay. Let's get right into this next idea with non-rule questions, right? A lot of the times there's going to be SAT concepts in grammar that actually aren't explicit grammar rules, but they're like conceptual rules, right? So that's what I talk about non-rule questions, which typically you're going to find them. They're going to be like word choice questions, transition, topic, and conclusion sentences, sentence order questions. And you can still find all of those on the College Panda blog. They're actually not there. They're in the College Panda blog. They're still talked about, but they're not conceptual in the same way that all the other rules are. Although the rules are extremely explicit, you know whether they're true or whether they're not true. This one is a little more conceptual in where there's like specific reasons for something. There isn't like a certain like formula that you can input and output. It's not necessarily pattern recognition as much as it is just like understanding a rule and then using everything to go by the rule, right? So the same idea of recognizing like the rule and applying those rules so it fits the certain pattern that they want to is still true, right? So I wouldn't worry about these too much, but these are a thing that it might take like a little additional effort to figure out what it is, because you need to build a strategy for these questions. If you've seen my reading video, which is my last video posted, I talk specifically about strategy building. You might need to use a little bit of strategy building for this if you get it wrong, especially during the practice phase, but definitely not during like the learning phase. Figure out what you mess up on and as a result, pick the right strategy for you, right? Okay, and here are just some quick tips that are just generally going to help you. These are the only ones that I've really found like effective for specific types of questions. So the grammar SAT loves conciseness, right? If you can say the same thing but in less words, that one is automatically more correct than saying the same exact thing with more words, right? So just the SAT loves conciseness. First of all, if you have a conciseness question, which is like what sentence is the best here, and it's all essentially the same sentence, or what's the most effective transition, effective way to combine the sentences. You want to pick the most concise one, right? And also, as soon as you pick the concise one, you need to check, is it grammatically clear? And, right, are all the pronouns and referent words, like, are those reference words, are those actually making sense now, right? So in the full version of the sentence, the uncombined version, let's say they don't use any pronouns. Let's say in the most concise version, they use a pronoun, but it no longer becomes explicitly clear what that pronoun refers to. That's extremely important, because that's the one way that they trip people up on those conciseness questions. So it's those two, grammatically correct and the pronouns and reference words are correct, that make the most concise option. Or maybe it's not the most concise one, it's the second most concise one, because that's the one that's actually is correct. Okay, frame of reference. It's this idea, with the conclusion or main idea questions, it'll often say, like, based on the entire passage, or based on the entire passage and the last paragraph, based on this current paragraph, or based on the previous sentence of the previous paragraph, right? That is a frame of reference. And essentially what you need to do is focus on that frame of reference every time you get a question on it, right? So if it says the entire passage, figure out the main idea of the entire passage, and then there's going to be one answer choice that encapsulates that the best, right? And if we're looking at, what is the main idea of the paragraph, then it should only reference that paragraph. You don't care about the main idea of the whole thing. You care about only the main ideas that the paragraph is trying to tell you, right? So make sure you're really paying attention to the frame of reference, because that is the number one discriminant thing, right? The thing that allows you to, like, immediately eliminate other answer choices because it doesn't apply. Okay, apply these rules, ace it. If you can spend the time to actually implement these tactics, spend at least an hour a day for 2 weeks, it's so possible to achieve a perfect score. An hour a day for 2 weeks is probably even too much to achieve a perfect score. If you actually scrap using your ear, apply this method and take it seriously, it's so guaranteed. Like, this is literally the framework and the strategy to improving grammar. Start today, learn the rules as soon as possible. The ones that you don't know, get started today on learning what they are. Just look them up. Go to the College Panda blog and look up that specific rule that you've been using your ear on. If you guys are interested in SAT prep, click the link down in the description. I only have a limited amount of spots left, so apply, because those are going to run out pretty soon. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned something today.